Well, thank you all for coming out, first of all. My name is Ben Travers. I'm here with, obviously, Minnie Driver, which you all just saw in the wonderful movie Return to Zero. We're going to get right into it, so we don't miss out on anything. So I like to start from the very beginning. So could you just tell us about how you first heard about the project and what stage it was in when you first heard about it and what attracted you to it?
Well, I was sent the script, and it's not that, it wasn't that different from the script that we actually shot. I think by the time they came to me, I think Fred Molina had already signed on, which already caught my attention because I was like, Fred's doing this, then it must be worth reading for sure. And then, you know, it's a pretty devastating read. And you start, you know how when you're reading something and you kind of, if you're pausing a lot to really try and figure out how you would do it, it took quite a long time to read because I was like, I just don't know how I would do this. I don't know how to do this. But it was such a cracking read and it was so awful and so brilliant. And then you start thinking about this is actually this guy's story. This is him and his wife. And now I'm going to have a conversation with him. How the hell is that going to work? And it was all so interesting and difficult that it seemed really worth pursuing. You know, but it was very well written. That was really it's really the founding thing. It doesn't matter how good an idea it is. If it's not well executed, there's no point.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's very apparent when you actually watch the film. But you touched on it a little bit. I mean, that first impression has got to be very difficult with Sean Hanish, the director, who's personally, this is his story. And then, you know, the character, it's so deep and there's so much going on there. Were you ever nervous or scared about taking on the role just because of what was surrounding it, like what was included in it?
Yeah, definitely. But that's never been a good enough reason to turn back. I mean, maybe it should be, but I'm glad it isn't. But it's also if you think, you know as an actor when you can't do something. You know, you really know it. You know this is not for me. This is for someone else. Even though, you know, you might need the paycheck or you can feel it. And when I read this, I was like, I know I can do this. I have no idea how to do it, but I know I can do it. So we should just begin. But there was, there's no preparation. You know, you can't figure that out. You can talk to people who've experienced it and you can see how they've synthesized and covered that pain or how they've recovered from it or moved on from it. But it's really fascinating. You know, grief is a really extraordinary, constantly moving, ever-changing entity. And how you or we all synthesize that is very different. So my only experience with death was losing my dad, and it is not the same. But that was as close as I could get. But really just talking to Sean and his wife, Kylie, you get it. You get it. They're very articulate people, and were very articulate about their journey. But it was a really fascinating, weird process as an actor. And I'm not a method actor in any way, shape, or form. And I couldn't put this down in between. You know, there was no really leaving it. And we cracked a lot of jokes, but I mean, I cracked a lot of jokes right on the edge of the precipice, about to kind of fall off into the abyss, as Paul ADELSTEIN would attest if he was here. I mean, there were days we were laughing so hard, he would not be laughing anymore, and he'd just be looking at me going, you gotta stop. This is crazy, now you're crazy.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that really hit me on the second viewing, was how much humor was injected into the movie. Like, there's a lot of funny little moments that help make it more realistic. Which just resonated in such a movie that was so dramatic and so true to life. And
I think the reason that it was true to life is because that, you know, that levity, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter, but however sad something has been, there is always, you know, it's always a fulcrum, particularly in a film. And we talked about the story, and then we talked about making a film, and this idea about putting more levity into it seemed important because otherwise it's just a dirge. It is so painful. You have to have this thing, but it's like, and how do you do that without it becoming unbelievable? And it seemed like Maggie's gallows humor could be, you know, was a good place for it. And then Andrea Anders, who's my best friend in real life. And so I was like, well, we'll get her to be the best friend. And she's one of the funniest people I know. And then you find your moments, you know, and then Sean puts all of that together. And I think it did work. It stopped it being maudlin, you know, it stopped it being sentimental, and I think it did make it real.
Yeah, there were a lot of little moments, especially with your friend, like you mentioned, like when you were at the bar and she was drinking and she was saying something like, "Oh well, I got to go home and get drunk now," and it's such a dark moment for
Yeah.
the film because we know what's going on with you and you know what's going on with
Yeah.
you, and it's a whole new level, but it still helps resonate and bring that back to.
That's the thing about grief. Like, it doesn't mean there's an absence of life, even though you think it should mean that, and that everything, you know, what's that great poem? All the clocks should stop, you know, it was in that film. The clocks should stop and stop the clocks, stop the thing. Don't you remember in Four Weddings and a Funeral, he reads that poem when his lovers died, and it's a really famous poem, and I can't remember who wrote it. It's like Auden or something.
I wish I could help you.
Yeah, you're looking at me blankly. But anyway, it's that idea. It's in Antony and Cleopatra as well, when Caesar hears that Antony is dead, he says the breaking of so great a thing should make a louder crack. And it's true. You think there should be some big fanfare, but it's not. It's life going on that is the weird irony of grief and of loss. And I think that was also what was so interesting about this film, is it was about that. It's like, what happens afterwards? You know, you only see the birth towards the end of the film, but you're watching the aftermath of that for most of the film. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, that construction of the film as well, where you actually don't see the stillbirth until closer to the end of the movie.
Exactly.
That absolutely helps.
I think that was something Sean did at the... Was that right, Sean? We played around with that. I mean, you played around with that, with where the scene came, didn't you? It came later. It used to come earlier when you first wrote it, and then you put it later when you saw it. Yeah.
But also, it was like what you said, it was really interesting seeing the aftermath, then seeing.
Yeah. And also, and I think probably Sean had to see if you could actually hold it, if you could hold that narrative without seeing what the cause, if you could just stay with the effect, and you know, if all of us had done our job right, it meant you could earn having it later. You didn't need the reveal, which is good. I mean, which means that, you know, it's a strong story.
Absolutely, and it worked. It worked very well. Could you talk a little bit about like how things were on set? I mean, obviously, this is going to be a little bit of a different set with such a personal story and it being very dark. You mentioned that you had some moments where you were laughing and you had to kind of bring it back down. Could you just talk a little bit about the direction that you got and how it varied from other projects you've been on?
Well, you know, I'd never been directed by someone whose story it was, but not just whose story, but this story. And it was I think the very first conversation I had with Sean was like, how on earth are you going to direct? How are you going to direct that scene? How are you going to direct the stillbirth scene, which is the reenactment of the very worst moment of your and your wife's life? How are you going to do that? And I remember Sean was like, I don't know, but I know that I can. I know that I've told the story. I know why I'm telling the story. And I think there was so much trust in and peace about actually being able to tell the story. And I just believed him that he could separate, and he did. And I was like, well, is he going to be able to separate from this, but just kind of like be behind the monitor and like kind of catatonic, and what will happen? And I was like, well, I guess we'll just cross that bridge if that happens. But I remember saying to him, the problem is, I'm going to be of no help to you. I know it. In those scenes, I'm not going to be able to take care of you like as I would my friend or someone I loved who was in a very difficult moment. I was like, I'm almost positive I won't be there. And that's very unlike me, because I'm always there. I don't disappear and you have to lock me in a box and then let me out to do a scene if I'm in prison or something. I'm not like that. But I did know the level of emotion in order for it to work. If it was where it needed to be, it would just be such a high octane thing. I wouldn't be able to shift back and go, okay, let's talk about like, how is this? It would just be like, can you keep up with the speeding train? And if you need to just try and guide the speeding train a little bit, but was pretty symbiotic. By the time we did that scene, there wasn't a whole lot of, it wasn't like we had to go in there and Sean had to say, I really think that you need to kind of think a little bit more about this or that. It wasn't that kind of direction. It was more sort of stay out of the way, and can we fit another camera in this tiny room and just get everything and put it together later? Because I don't think there is a way of directing that scene in the moment, like as an actor. I think you just have to let it happen, and you have to piece it together afterwards, which is weird. And I wouldn't recommend that necessarily, but it worked because we all trusted that there was something more than us. It sounds very pretentious, but there was something. There was a momentum that was going, and a sort of emotional momentum that was going that you just didn't want to get in the way of by giving it a note, And that was really beautiful and very, very. I've never experienced that before, ever.
I mean, that's the kind of sincerity that you need to really make this kind of movie work. So for me, it never reads as pretentious or anything like that. It's just, you have to believe in that if you're going to be
You
in the
do.
moment
You
and
have
do
to believe it 1,000%. You have to watch somebody descend into just utter despair. You sort of have to see that. And if you don't see that, then it doesn't work. It becomes, it just becomes maudlin, sentimental, manipulative nonsense, which, you can get at any multiplex any day of the week. But not on Lifetime, not anymore.
That's a great point. That's a very interesting point. Could you expand a little bit on that? Because one of the things that interests me, I work for Indiewire, and we do a lot of independent films, and a lot of the actors I speak to nowadays are very concerned about their work being seen. So, like, when you take on a role like this and you're not sure where it's going to end up, how do you think that this experience is compared to getting into to a small theater or an independent distribution venue, that kind of thing?
Well, it's so funny because, you go, you make a film and you go, well, this will be distributed as a film. Like, it'll be out there as a film. It's a film. But the reality of independent filmmaking these days is, so what? So if we'd got picked up by some small distribution company or even a bigger distribution company, and we would have been on maybe a couple of screens in New York and a couple of screens in LA and maybe one in Chicago, and maybe if we were lucky, sort of 5,000 or 6,000 people would have seen that film. That's terrible. That's terrible. So then you have far less apparent cachet, like you're on Lifetime, which has all this Lifetime, and not only that, but you're a Lifetime movie, which has this stigma attached to it. But then you hear about this, simultaneous simulcast that they've got, which means they're showing it in about 5 or 6 different countries simultaneously, which literally means millions and millions of people saw this film, which that puts all of your sort of highfalutin notion of filmmaking to shame when it's a story that could genuinely be of comfort to somebody, and I know has been. I categorically know that it has, even though it is so hard and difficult to watch. There are people for whom this is a life-saving film because they feel like their story is being told and the death of their child was for nothing. There's a meaning somehow, or that sharing the story makes them feel better. So actually, it is an amazing version of events for a small film that we made for $5.50. I mean, maybe less. Nothing. We had nothing. And I made movies for nothing, and this was less than nothing. And everybody made it with everything. It was an inexperienced crew, but a very wonderful DP and very experienced actors, and a director who absolutely knew what it was that he wanted to do. So it sort of somehow comes together. But we didn't have enough money to finish the film, and all those names you saw at the end, those were families who contributed to the Kickstarter campaign that helped us finish this film. Like, this is their story, this is their film, their children, that's the legacy. They get to have something, I don't know, that the spirit of their children is in, and it all starts sounding so, I don't know. I'm not for actors standing on soapboxes about causes and using it as a platform, but when you actually do make a film that means something, that does mean something to someone, I think that's your moment to go. It's meaningful, and the fact that all those angel parents helped us finish this film, it's not ironic, it's fantastic. And amazing that Lifetime, showed the film in its entirety and showed every single one of those children's names. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. That was one of the more important moments of the movie, and something that I thought gave it kind of a second life. If you look this up online, you'll see a lot of pages of this movie. There's a Facebook page and a Kickstarter page, and unlike a lot of the other promotional stuff for films out there these days, these have a lot of stories attached to them. They have a lot of feedback. Have you gotten anything that's really stricken you emotionally that someone said to you, or that you've read, or that you've heard about?
The sheer numbers of people on, I'm not on Facebook, but on Twitter. I mean, literally thousands of people going, thank you, this was our story, this was me and my family. We watched and we cried and we felt comforted, and it feels that it wouldn't be, that it would be like going and reopening a wound, but it's apparently not that. There is great healing in it, that's amazing. Like, that's really amazing, and I wouldn't have anticipated that, but just from what people have written to me, you know, being incredibly grateful that this film was made. You know, it's a far bigger community than I wish it was. You know, I wish it was a tiny community, but it's not. It's huge.
Well, getting back to your process a little, you mentioned how you're not a method actor, but you've told me before that it was, you kind of had to stay in that space. Like this was a movie where it was kind of hard to come out of. So could you talk a little bit about how you prepared to get into that, like how you prepared for this role in particular?
Well, I mean, you know, if you're a method actor, you have to actively stay in it. You know, you tell your friends, only call me by, and I've done films. When I did a film with Phil Hoffman, I was constantly asking him what he thought we were having for lunch, and he'd be like, Minnie, we're in character, and I'm staying here, and I'm not who you think I am. And I'd be like, oh, sorry. But do you think we're having chips? sorry. And he always thought that was really funny, like, you know. He'd give me shit about it, but so the thing is, you have to actively do it. You have to stay in it. You really do. You have to tell people around you. That's how you stay in it. With this, it didn't matter if I put on, you know, Walking on Sunshine, driving home from Palos Verdes, if I called my happiest nephew and asked him to tell me about his day at school. It did not matter what I did. I could not shake this realm that I was in. And so after a while, I was like, well, I just will stay in it. I can't get out of it. So I will just stay here. And it's okay. I mean, we shot it in like 19 days. So it wasn't like I had to stay there for a very long time, although it felt long, but it also was an amazing experience. It wasn't all awful. I mean, there were horrific moments and terrible bits, but there was so much love in the same way of like when you've got nothing and everyone's there showing up every day because they love this thing. There's such amazing feeling of community, and, you know, all these actors, Kathy Baker and Andrea and Fred and Paul ADELSTEIN. I mean, God, they're incredible people. Connie Nielsen, they're really surprising, amazing people. So, yeah, I stayed in that weird place, and they let me, you know, they didn't poke around. And then I would laugh hysterically often. Yeah, quite fragile. But
Sometimes you need that to just get through the day.
you do.
So.
You do, and I think that was apparent. So, you know.
You also told me that this was the hardest thing you've ever had to do as an actress, and I mean, a lot of that is apparent on screen, but I guess I was just curious how much of that was in particular because of the role itself, or in particular because of the outside circumstances, because of the personal story that was involved, or if it was just all kind of rolled into one.
I think it was a perfect storm. Okay. I mean, I really do, because you know if you're going to go and play. Who do I really? I'm just thinking, like, if you're going to go and play Nora in A Doll's House, you know what you're getting into. You know, you just got to, you know what you've got to break it down and what you've got to do, and you're going to be in this process. But with this, there were so many other factors. The fact that it was true, the fact that it was true, the fact that it was true, the fact that there was my son, there was my child, meeting the children that Sean and Kylie went on to have, which made me think about Norbert. It was a never-ending cycle of kind of experiencing this in all levels. And every time you thought you'd sort of got through processing one part, you'd be doing another scene that would start out funny and end up incredibly sad that you hadn't anticipated, or a scene where you thought you were going to cry, but you really didn't, you know, and you really just told the story. So it was very surprising, and that's what made it such an incredible experience as an actor, because you just never knew what you were going to get. You kind of calibrate for allowing it to be and not really trying and trusting all the years that you've been working and all the times that you've gone, this is a shitty fucking role and I hate doing this and I wish I had something that I could really get my teeth into. And then you know, and it shows up and you're going, well, here it is. Here it is. So you just get on with it and don't fuck it up. Yeah.
That's an interesting way to put it. You mentioned this was a short shoot. You said it was only 19 days. How close was it to your production on About a Boy? I don't know the timeline exactly between when they each were shot, or how if they had any overlap.
When did
or
we
anything
shoot it? That's right.
So it's been a bit.
Yeah, and then I made the pilot that following May.
Okay.
Oh no, before March, yeah. So it was before About a Boy.
What was it like transitioning from one to the other? Just kind of gearing up for one and then gearing back down and then gearing up for a comedy. I guess
There were a couple
necessary?
moments on the pilot where they were a bit worried that, you know, there was a scene where Fiona, the character I play on About a Boy, where she cries at this dinner table, and it was written in the thing, but I was still just a bit on edge. And so, you know, I'm there and I'm really crying, and all of these comedy executives are stricken with like, oh, this is a total disaster. Somebody wrangle Driver. And Jon Favreau was like, he was so brilliant. He just stood up, because they were all like really worried, and they would, you know, when people think you can't hear them because there's like a piece of fabric hanging, so you have to remind them, no, you can't see me, but I can still hear what you're saying. So anyway, they're all like, well, Jesus Christ, I mean, it's meant to be funny, and I mean, she's crying like that. I mean, I know she's got to cry, but I mean, there's crying and there's crying. And then, and Jon Favreau was like, just shut up and let her do it. It's got to start here, and then you've got to get to so you've got to get it so it's real, and then you bring it back, and then you make it so that it's not just the color of sadness, and then you start bringing in these other things. But he's so brilliant about understanding that comedy is often very sad, that he told them all just to back off and shut up, and they did, and then we did it a few times, and there were a couple of moments where he was like a dance mom behind the camera, kind of going. And that made me laugh, and I was like, oh God, all right, yeah. But it was good. There was, and he knew this other thing that I'd done, and they were all. He completely got it because he is a brilliant director. But that was there was a little bit of a sticky moment, and then it was fine. It was absolutely fine, you know. And you kind of get into a very different place. You know, I love that show for very different reasons.
I can only imagine. But I mean, it looks like such a fun show to be a part of. When you see that kind of energy and that kind of chemistry on the screen while you're watching it, it just kind of seems natural to assume that it's happening on set. Like, is that just the vibe?
It is, definitely. It's very, very, very fun. David Walton is just one of the best people you'll ever meet. He's just so nice and funny and kind and really good. And it's so nice because I know, you know when an actor's been trying for a while to like get it going and it just hasn't quite happened yet, and then they have their opportunity to do that, and it's so good. He's just such a good person. He just deserves all of that, and we have a lot of fun. We do laugh a lot. I'm very rude to him. I'm very rude all the time, which I get away with because I'm English.
There you go. That's part of the charm.
Yep.
Is that balance important to you? Do you look for the kind of variance in roles where you do like a really heavy drama, then you take a comedy? Do you just look for good scripts?
If you're Angelina Jolie, you can plan it out years in advance. But no, I mean, I've still got a mortgage. I mean, you really do. That's why you have to, when the opportunities come, you just have to go. This is it. It's happening right now. This is it. And you have to just do it. And it doesn't matter if it's a film for like $5.50. You still know this is worth my all. This is worth my all. It's worth my all. And then you're sort of devastated when it doesn't get picked up, and all these people come out after screenings and distribution, and they go, yeah, it's an amazing film, we could never market it, and we can't do anything with it, sorry. And you hear that for a while, and then no festivals will take it. And then suddenly someone does, out of nowhere, a year and a half, 2 years after you made it, and then suddenly I don't know if vindication is the right word, but it's like, I did it and I would have done it anyway, but I'm so glad that people are seeing it. I am so glad because I am very, very proud. So, I wish I could plan a drama and then a comedy and a thing, but you really just do the best thing that comes your way. You really do. You just do the best thing that comes your way. It doesn't matter what it is. You just keep doing that and keep doing that. And that's what I've always done. And sometimes it works out and there are lean years and there are great years and then there are more lean years. But I'll stand by all the stuff I'll stand by everything that I've done. I know why I did it.
That's good. I mean, that's important, and it seems to be working fairly well, even if, as you say, there are lean years or years that are a little tougher. I mean, right now you're in the heat of an awards race. I mean, you just got a Critics' Choice Award nomination, which is great.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm really, I'm really happy, and I'm really happy because it's this film. It really means a lot. There are films I've done for which it would not mean as much. I mean, I'd be happy and stuff because of course it's nice getting stuff like that. That doesn't happen very often, but it means a lot. This one does.
I can only imagine. We're going to get into a little bit of the audience questions now because we've got a lot of good ones from you guys. First and foremost, from Trip Langley, he asks, you've worked in every genre and medium of entertainment. Is there any that interests you the most?
Well, I'd really like to do a musical. I mean, I did Phantom of the Opera, but I didn't sing that. I didn't sing that role because I'm not a high soprano, and Andrew Lloyd Webber would not put it down to an alto. Which was frustrating, but also, that was his piece. But I would really like to do a musical movie, big, beautiful, guys and dolls. Addie, that's what I'd like to do. Right there.
They keep trying to make it. They keep trying to get that going. You got to be on that.
I know. What's the other one? There's a few. I mean, they do keep trying to make them, and I that's got to happen. I'd like to do that.
Well, here's hoping. I'd like to see that for sure. Maybe they can do something with About a Boy. Maybe have like a musical episode. I mean, Kate is pretty inventive. They might be able to.
We've definitely talked about that for next season. I'm hoping that we will do that. That we will do a fully sort of musical. It'll be so great.
That would be exciting. All right. So the next question is from Till, and she says, or he, I'm sorry. What is the type of work that interests you? And what are the kind of roles that interest you? So what do you gravitate to, I guess, more than anything else?
I do think I like the things where there is emotion and that it's also funny. Because it's the hardest thing to do, is to kind of let the pendulum swing from one thing to the other and make it believable. Those are all my favourite films, the Terms of Endearment, and I mean, Good Will Hunting to a certain degree had that, where it's really funny and it's also really heartfelt and real and sad, and that's what I like to do. And that's hard. It's a hard version to do. They don't write that many things that are like that.
I mean, I bet it is, but I'm glad you said that was your favorite because it comes through so much. And one of my favorite scenes from Good Will Hunting is the joke that you tell when you first meet his friends at the bar. I mean, that's such it's kind of a crude joke, but it works very well in that film. It's funny. It's endearing. It wraps up everything that thing's about. So that, I mean, obviously, sorry, just telling everybody what they already know. Another question, Colleen Braw. What is one thing you know now about acting and the biz that you didn't when you started and that you wish you did?
Oh, golly. That you can afford to play more in it. Like, it is a hard life to choose, like being an actor. You don't ever know when you're gonna. I mean, the fact that I know what I'll be doing in February of next year, I promise it's probably like the first time in 25 years that's happened. And And it might not, because if they said they were picking us up for 22, but then it might all go tits up and we might only do 13. I know what I'm doing till November, for sure. It doesn't hurt to remember, however hard the job is or small the job is, to have fun, like to play, because it is playing. It is really playing, not just the sort of lifeline to what the next job might be or your paycheck or something, but rather it's, we play, we get to be childlike. And I wish I'd remembered that a bit and not thought it was also life and death when I was younger.
That's good advice. That's good advice. A little bit of support from the crowd. That's good. Not prodding you at all. All right, so last question from the group. We're going to try to send this out on a high note, even though it's a little bit of a tough movie. Scott wants to know of a fun experience on set, whether from, he doesn't specify, so whether from Return to Zero or from another movie you have, just something that was a lot of fun that sticks out in your memory from being right there in it.
Well, I tell you, I went, when we were shooting Good Will Hunting in Boston, I went to watch the scene that Matt and Robin did on the park bench by the pond. It was right in the park in just the middle of Boston. And I went because I loved that scene. I wanted to see them shoot it. And I was, not working that day. And I went, and, they were just kind of, we were just breaking for lunch, and we just had sandwiches and stuff, and we were standing around. And, Robin started, I don't know, he told a joke or something. He told a joke to me and Matt and Ben. We were standing there, and we were, like, laughing. And, like, a couple of people on the grass who'd come and sat down, like, they started laughing. And he just kind of caught wind of that. So then he just, to these two people sitting there, he then, like, told another joke. And I wish I'd had, like, time-lapse photography, because by the end of lunch, which was, it was a half-hour lunch, word had got to the hotels, like, on the green, and people were coming out, and the whole park was just full of people, and Robin was doing full stand-up with no microphone, like, in his costume, just standing on an apple box, like, doing his thing, and all these people had come out to eat their lunch, and it was absolutely brilliant. He can't resist. Yeah, it was good.
Well, good choice for a story. Thank you very much for
You're
joining
welcome.
us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
Thank
having us,
you.
Screen Actors Guild. Thanks everybody for coming out. I'm Ben
Thank
Travers.
you.
I'm with Indiewire.
Thanks, Ben. Cheers.